Hi, friends. Joseph Varghese here. Welcome to Rules for Success, our podcast. Access our podcast at rulesforsuccess.com. Also across Spotify, YouTube, and most other channels. I'm here with a friend of mine, Eric Nehrlich. And Eric and I have connected in recent weeks through a common friend, Rich Cooper. Rich and I go back 20 years, and I've actually had Rich on my podcast. You can catch an early episode of Rich at rulesforsuccess.com. Rich is also a coach, a leadership coach, and Rich and Eric connected through Anya, Rich's wife, and through that connection, he's fallen in love with Eric's process and what he's done for organizations, companies. Eric has a unique background. He comes from the technology world. He's a technology management consultant, where he was kind of like I was too, interesting enough, at an earlier point in my life. And he's major extraordinary education background in terms of where he's been, and now he's an executive coach. He lives and breathes. He's in the world of Silicon Valley, and formerly worked at Google. And he engages people in conversations such as burnout and much more. He's an executive coach, 25 years experience in the tech industry, and he loves to identify challenges and mindsets and habits that hold people back from their next level of leadership. Eric, it's so great to have you today. I'm excited about having you on for the next 30, 35 minutes, really providing a lot of value to our audience. For all of you in the background watching this, you can access this replay at rulesforsuccess.com. There'll also be a mind map that my team will be putting together, summarizing some of the key points here from Eric. And Eric, what's going on? How are you today?
It's going well, Joseph. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Yeah, what's going on? It's I'm in a busy phase of life and lots going on, which is, as an independent coach, that's a good thing. Like, people
Yes.
are coming to me and asking for help and looking for ways to help themselves get unstuck. And then sometimes I'm like, man, that's a lot on my plate right now, and I'm kind of in that tension at the moment.
And there's more need for that these days. There's certainly more need, especially specifically people going through burnout. I went through some burnout 20 years ago when I left and I shifted to the world of growth, leadership, and coaching myself. And these days are more entrepreneurs and leaders and organizations than ever. People dealing with struggles, expectations in these environments. They're fast paced, using AI, other innovations. What brought you here? So, what brought you from a background going to Stanford, going to MIT, working for some of the top organizations out there as a consultant, as a leader, getting to executive coaching? Like, tell us about that transition.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I started off my academics studying physics. I was on the search for truth. I wanted to find the ultimate truth of the universe. And so, like, the most objective of the hardest of the hard sciences. And then I left grad school and went into the world of business and started realizing truth was not as firm and attainable as I had thought. There were different truths. There were different perspectives. There were different things going on. This was really brought home to me at one of my jobs, where the engineering team was delivering great results. I was an engineer at the time, and stuff no one else in the world could do at the time. And I was like, man, we are succeeding. We're going to do great. This is the .com era. So I'm like, we're going to make our millions of dollars. I'm on my rocket ship. And the company raised money. They raised like $40 million. I'm like, oh yeah, we are like going to go to the moon. And then we went bankrupt a year later. I'm like, I'm missing something. There is something that I did not understand here. And so, again, me being a scientist by training, was like, what is the truth I'm missing here? And I realized the truth was leadership. We had a CEO that was making decisions that were not aligned with reality, and that eventually caught up to him. And so that was, gosh, almost 20 years ago now. But since then, I've been kind of moving more and more into exploring this practice of leadership, because I realized leadership is a multiplier. It's what it can take an average organization and make it extraordinary. It can take an extraordinary team and turn it to zero. And helping leaders become better, more effective, create more impact is what I help them do now as an executive coach. And what people don't realize is it all starts with what's inside you. And
Starts with the individual.
Starts with the leader dealing with their own stuff. And that's
Yes.
where the magic is. And so that's what I do now is I help people discover their own truth, their own meaning, their own purpose. And then with that clarity, they can focus and create the impact they want in the world.
You've written a book on this topic too that came out a year ago, I believe, right? Specifically on the journey and creating impact, and how was that journey becoming an author? And I mean, impact is basically that. You know, we write books, write articles, create content, do these podcasts. How has that journey been in taking all of those ideas, right, and coaching executives, leaders out there in Silicon Valley, and I'm sure other places too, because we live in a virtual world now. How has it been being able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, writing a book was one of those things I've dreamed about since I was a kid, but I never knew what I wanted to say. But in my first couple of years, first 3 years of coaching, I realized I'm coaching dozens of different executives from like different backgrounds, different functions, finance, engineering, sales, product. And I was saying the same thing to all of them. And I'm like, that's interesting. Like the same ideas, the same stories, the same challenges are coming up across all these different people, all these different functions. So then I was like, I wonder if I can take what I do in these coaching journeys one on one and turn it into a book form. And that was the challenge I set myself. And the book is out. It's called You Have a Choice Beyond Hard Work to Meaningful Impact. Um, and yeah, what you said, it putting something out in the world is a lot of work, but it creates opportunities for connection. I mean, this is actually how Anya read the book. I was like, this book's amazing. And she was like, Rich, you got to read this book.
Yes.
and Rich reached out to me. I was like, that was good. Like, how, like, let's talk. And he connected me to you. And like, so we wouldn't be on this podcast if I hadn't taken the initiative to put something out in the world of this is what I stand for. This is who I am.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the choices, as I understand it from tapping at your book, is taking personal responsibility. This is like a wisdom passed along generations, Stephen Covey, or different organizations. It's changed my life. And I built an organization focused on accountability called Success Circles, taking this one idea. When we're 100% accountable, we're a cause in our lives. It's freeing. It's freeing. I'm curious, how do you bring that concept to individuals, to executives, to leaders? Because as you mentioned before, so year 2000, all these .coms, I was also in that era too as well. So I went to a lot of parties back then in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And saw a lot of .coms falter and fail. And of course, in recent years, you're seeing a number of organizations and crypto organizations, and a lot of the news specific around leaders who haven't taken personal responsibility. They've gotten into blaming their partners or blaming their other people just to avoid jail time. How do you bring this distinction to the individual, to the entrepreneur, in a way that's freeing to them? And I know your clients aren't just entrepreneurs per se, but they're the whole wide gambit, especially top organizations. You were recently at Google as an example. How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I do work with entrepreneurs. And I guess what I'll say, first thing I'll say is like, yeah, this is not new knowledge. You mentioned Stephen Covey. I mean, if you go back to the Roman Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius said the same thing. The
Yes.
Buddhists say the same thing. This is something that people keep on discovering over and over again because it's a function of the human brain and how we think. So it's timeless wisdom in that sense. Yeah, I guess I start by like you said, I can tell somebody's not ready for this when they're blaming other people. Like, well, I couldn't do this because my manager or my CEO or my investors or my board said I had to. Like, but why did you have to do what they say?
Mhm.
They're like, well, because I have to. Like, what would happen if you didn't? I don't know. Like, I just have to. Like, oh, and I kind of like keep pushing until like, what is the consequence that you're avoiding?
Mhm.
And when we acknowledge that we could make a different choice, yes, there will be consequences. Then we actually have a choice. So, I mean, partly comes out of my own experience when I burned out. As you mentioned, burnout is prevalent in Silicon Valley, and that was the dilemma I was stuck in. I was trying to earn a promotion. My manager gave me more and more work and said, "This is what you have to do to get promoted." I kept saying yes, and yes, and yes, until I was working 100-hour weeks at Google and burning out and destroying my health. And eventually my body just collapsed. Like it just literally could not function anymore. I was in bed for a week. And that was a turning point for me because I finally said, like, what if I said no? And I did that. And the world didn't end. I said, no, I'm not working this hard anymore. No, I don't want more work. No, I don't even want that promotion. And it changed my life because all of a sudden I took control. I had choices. There were consequences. Like, yeah, I lost the promotion. My performance rating got slashed. Half my team got taken away because my manager was like, you can't handle it. I'm going to give it to somebody else. Like, okay. And what I got back was my time, my health, and my freedom. And that was a trade I was willing to make.
Yes. Those things are priceless. Specifically, I know you're also married and you've got 2 children, as do I as well. Also, two or 3 children. Help remind me again.
I have 2 and a third is on the way. So
Got it. Yes.
we will be 3 in a month.
Yes. I recall that from our last conversation too, as well. Also, so I mean, it's so the most important thing, I believe personally, is family. That's one of my values, and we all have different values. And sometimes in the hierarchy of things, where we are in our 20s versus 30s versus 40s, getting married, all of that, those values often shift. And for me, prioritizing health is a vital part of that as well. So I acknowledge you for really prioritizing yourself, and also as you work with executives, really helping them identify their values, maybe even helping them identify their purpose too, because I imagine purpose is having a personal purpose in life is really critical toward making decisions, making choices, specifically when we're given options to, let's say, work an extra 20, 30 hours, maybe getting a percentage of an organization, or the things of that sort. Really comes down to our values, right? It comes down to like how what the bigger picture is in life, right? And you certainly have a lot of experience from coaching and being in that early on, the .com revolution to where you are now. How do you help people engage in purpose? Like, what's how do you engage in meaningful purpose for them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the title of the show is Rules for Success.
Yes.
What does success mean to you? That's the question. That's the question that people never actually ask themselves. Oh, I want to get promoted. And then what? I want this title. And then what? I want to make this many $1 million. And then what? And like, it's really interesting. People never consider it. They're like, they just see the next step in front of them and they never consider, like, where am I going? Where am I aiming? What's the direction I want to go with my life?
Yes.
Like that's literally the first chapter of my book. It's called Aim. Like, what do you want to do? Have some ideas about that. Then we can figure out how to optimize for that, or how to move in that direction. And as you said, that clarity around our values, around our purpose, around what we consider success, that simplifies decision making tremendously. I mean, this is a minor example, but at some point recently, I was talking to a potential client. They're like, "Oh, can you meet Saturday?" I'm like, "No." Like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "My weekends are family time."
Yeah.
And they're like, "But I just need like 30 minutes." I'm like, "No, like the my family comes first on the weekends." And they were just like, they were first taken aback, and they're like, "I've never heard somebody be so clear." Because I knew this way I have chosen to run my life, and I'm not willing to compromise that.
It's setting right boundaries, and exactly, not willing to compromise your boundaries, your values, and got it. That's important. I'm sure that client learned a lot from seeing you and seeing how you operate.
Exactly. It models that, like, with that clarity, it actually makes decisions easy. Like, otherwise, I could spend every weekend to say, is this meeting important enough? Is this meeting important for me to go on a Saturday? And like, I made the choice once, and now it's easy. And yeah, I mean, if something was absolutely critical and so important, yeah, I would do it. But it's like the default is really clear for me.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I often refer to clarity and focus as the key to leadership and the key to success. When you're clear what's important to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get clear what's important to you. Get clarity. Ask questions. Your questions are very vital too, and helping people define success, as you mentioned just now. And what does that mean? And maybe what we think is success is based on our environment, or what our manager, or perhaps what we grew up with our parents,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps. But it's basically, how do we define success? I love
Yes.
that. And so how do you get people out of overwhelm? So sometimes people get being stuck, being overwhelmed. That has them not really see what success is. They're just in this world of being on a kind of a hamster wheel, right? Going over and over again, not really being able to see. So how do you help people gain the clarity to break out of that?
Yeah. The first thing I do is hold up a mirror
Hmm.
and I say, "Where did you spend your time last week?" And as a rough kind of approximation, there's about 100 hours in the week
Hmm.
after you take out sleep and eating and take basic
Yes.
self care. You got about 100 hours each week. How did you spend them last week? How much went to work? How much went to family? How much went to friends? How much went into yourself? Then look at that. Are you happy with those with that breakdown?
Yes. Yes.
If you are, great. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
But most of the time, people are coming to me and it's like 80 hours a week on work, no time for themselves, minimum of anything else. And they're like, no, I don't like this. I'm like, well, what would you want it to look like in your ideal world? What would, if you were living your best life, what would those proportions look like? And then, and the same thing applies even within the hours at work. Like, how are you spending your time at work? Are you doing the most impactful thing? Oh my God, I waste so much time in these meetings. So stop going. But people would be angry with you. Okay, so it's more important that people aren't angry than you than that you're wasting your time. Are you okay
Yeah.
with that? And just really taking these unconscious reactions and turning them into conscious choices. Like,
Yes.
that's the choice you're making. You're like, I would rather I would rather not have this person be angry at me than, and I would rather waste this hour than have this person be angry at me. Like,
Exactly.
okay,
Exactly.
then at least make that choice consciously. That's all I'm
Yes.
asking you to do.
I think people are often, especially entrepreneurs, they're often struggle with defining a set of what we call in success circles rules of engagement. What a rules of engagement
Mm,
are. And we've kind of established set of rules that we think meet the needs of the people we're supporting, our family, and so forth. What if we could reshift those rules, right? And then
mhm,
have people align with the rules that we have, and potentially in having a set of rules and values that are out there, people to see, there could be even more respect coming forward as well, also, and seeing that model of world could even create more progress, perhaps. The idea of Pareto's principle, it's a whole kind of idea in the world of technology as well, also focusing on the 20%. And sometimes the 20% might be just eliminating those things, those meetings, or maybe having stand-up meetings, or having, maybe more engaging scrum sessions that are more on point versus general meetings. Back in the days when I used to work in the corporate world, we had meetings on a regular basis that would be 90 minutes long, and week after week after week. And there was certain kind of needs that were met by people by having those meetings, but they didn't necessarily move the project forward. And of
yeah.
course, in recent years and all this new technology and agile and other things that are out there, they found ways to refine those processes. They've also found ways to engage people in their strengths. We all have
Mhm.
unique strengths and personality tests, things of that sort can help us with that. Um, I'm just fascinated because you also share that background in technology as well, also. So I'm sure you bring a lot of this forward with the work you do. What does your
Mhm.
framework look like? So is there a framework you developed to help people stay on balance, kind of balance essentially their need for ambition and drive for personal fulfillment?
Yeah. I think one thing I want to go back to something you said about the rules for engagement that people develop because I think that's so critical, and it's especially for entrepreneurs. It's how you scale yourself as a leader.
Hmm.
Because if you're clear about what's important to you as a decision maker, then that can be transmitted. Decisions can be made without you that are aligned with what you would want.
Yes.
And I always use the example of Mark Zuckerberg saying, "Move fast and break things." Quality is important. Execution speed is important. But don't come to me if you have a question here. Like, I want you to move fast. And it's okay to break things if you move fast.
Yes.
And he made that decision once, and the whole organization, the whole engineering organization of Facebook moved faster as a result. He got alignment. He didn't have to be involved in every meeting. Like, do we release this feature? Should we make it better? Or do we just go for it? Everything was done. And that's an example of like rules for engagement don't just apply personally, but they apply at the organizational level. And if a leader can be very clear, here's the principles I use, here's how I'm going to make this decision, people will make decisions without them, and they can get out of the room and go do more important stuff. So, okay, now I forgot the actual question. It was something about.
I was curious. I was curious what frameworks you have developed toward that. But but in alignment to what you said just now, I think keeping things simple also move fast, break things is great, and keeping things simple, and that can be useful on the business side, right? Or it could be even useful if people are able to bring that forward into other areas of life too. In our community, it's about making the day better, making each other better, and I believe that's some core principles that I personally adopt in our household that I've taught my kids as well. Also, beyond just my clients in success circles, it goes beyond that, and I just think it's fascinating when we can create a culture that it's useful in other areas too as well also. And of course, maybe that what Mark had may not be as applicable to like a family to a family per se, but I don't want my kids to go around move fast. To have a 5-year-old one has movement.
I'm not saying that's the right for everybody. Yeah, no, but here's how we engage with each other. We all help out when we're getting ready for dinner. We all help out cleaning out. Those are 2 rules in my household.
Yes. Love that.
But yeah, I think the way some of the frameworks I have here, it's like for your own personal engagement, like a mentor of mine once shared this idea of like, do you work on the most important thing first? And that sounds simple, but it's like so many of us fill our days with this and that and the other thing, and we're not even clear like what is the one thing? If I did one thing today, that would make today a success. Get that done first. Again, simple. The Stoics have said it, like millions of people have said it, but it's really hard to do because that means saying no to other things. Saying no to the emails, saying no to the meetings, saying no to the stuff that'll distract you from getting the important thing done. And it's taken me years to kind of really operationalize that and actually turn it into a principle of how I actually operate. Not just something that's like a nice idea, but like, am I actually willing to say what's most important and say no to other stuff?
Yes. I got that. Amazing.
Yeah.
And how do you bring it to people now? To people who are just they're overwhelmed, right? They're in the midst of it. They're not able to see. And I think earlier you mentioned it too, kind of clarity. Do you have a clarity tool that you recommend or a process you recommend to help people get clear on what that is? Is it a matter of maybe stepping away? It's like sometimes I step away and go in nature and come back, or I'll go on a run, and it's those things, stepping out of our environment. There's a quote from Yogananda. I think Bucky Fuller also requotes it at various points. He's also kind of an engineer. Environment is stronger than willpower. Kind of shifting environments can be a useful thing as well. Any recommendations you have to help kind of anyone, entrepreneurs, leaders, or organizational heads, get clear?
Yeah, I think reflection and stepping away is critical. So the smallest micro version is take a minute in the morning when you're brushing your teeth or in the shower or making your coffee to ask yourself, what would make today success? And then take a minute in the evening when you're brushing your teeth or wrapping up your day to say, like, did I do the thing? And if not, what got in the way? And what will I do to address that tomorrow? So that's like the micro version.
Yes.
The slightly bigger version is the weekly version. Like you start Friday afternoon, you look back at the week. What did I want to get done last week? Did I get it done? What got in the way? How did I spend my time that wasn't aligned with my intent? What do I want to get done next week? So I run this. I have a few other coaches that we send an email every Monday morning. Here's my plan for the week. And the next week, I'm like, here's what I actually did. And just that weekly accountability email helps me take the time to say, like, what do I actually want to get done this week? What's most important this week? And then holding myself accountable and saying, like, ooh, that didn't happen. What got in the way? Forces me to constantly improve. That's, it's kind of the entrepreneurial version is build, measure, learn, right? That's the learning is the accountability part.
Yes. Amazing. I love that. Gretchen Rubin has a book talking about the 4 personalities, and basically the core of it is basically some of us are intrinsically motivated. Some people are more extrinsically motivated, and some of that can apply to different areas of life too. Also, like when I go running, I like running with a group, being with a group of people when I go running, and there's some other areas of life where I'm more intrinsically motivated, where I'm okay with that. But it's figuring it out for ourselves, and I love accountability. So I love that you're sending out an email, sending out a communication. Sometimes if we don't do those things, then they're skipped, versus when there's somebody else who's looking after us, like a coach like yourself, asking questions or directing us. it makes all the difference, especially if it leads to making progress, being more happier, being more fulfilled. And that's a key thing too. I believe there is a balance between all of that, like the need for speed, the need for just scaling and progress, as well as taking care of ourselves as well. And
Yeah.
so really, really well said. I love the simplicity of that, the framework of that, just brushing teeth, asking a question, maybe even taking a shower too. My wife, for her mechanism for getting clear is taking a long shower. So my job in the morning is this very simple. It's making sure she has a pathway from the bed to the shower that's easy, that's clear, where she's got her alone time there for about 15-20 minutes. And the second part of my morning is ensuring that she's got her coffee. But everyone's different. But just recognizing what those little things are for ourselves. So I love the simplicity in what you just shared before.
Yeah, and I love your point that everybody's different and there's different personality types. So that's one of the things I love about coaching. It's like there's no prescription that works for everybody. Like I have ideas, but again, I'm a scientist by training, and I'm like, let's experiment. Let's try something. If this is your reaction, let's try something different. What would happen if you did this instead of that? What would happen if you tried this? How can you interrupt the pattern? And people try it and they're like, oh, that didn't go how I wanted. Like, oh, great. Does that work for you? Do you want to do more of it? They're like, yeah. And those little micro steps really stack really quickly. And that's how change happens.
What's the most surprising thing you've learned from coaching others, like on the journey across their crossroads? I'm curious, and I'm sure you work with hundreds of people over the years, especially your book, right? Great impact. It's out there. And what's the most surprising thing you've learned?
What's the most surprising thing I've learned? That's a really good question. I guess it's simple but not easy. Like the things we're saying are simple. They've been said for, as I said, thousands of years. There's nothing new here. And yet we don't do them. It's like, eat healthier and exercise. Everybody knows that.
Yes.
Very few of us actually do it. So I think the challenge with a lot of this stuff is that we hear it, we're like, that's simple, I get it, but then we don't do it. And why we don't do it is where things get interesting. There's some unconscious motivation. There's stuff inside of us that is blocking us from doing the thing we say we want to do. And again, there's a couple chapters in the book about discovering those own limiting beliefs and deconstructing them and saying like, oh, I can't say no to my manager. Oh, that's keeping me from taking care of myself, which I say is important. Let's dive deep there. And I think what's surprising to me is there's both a universality to these stories and these unconscious beliefs, these limiting beliefs, and they're also incredibly specific. They're specific experiences that we have that embed themselves on nervous systems. They go like, I'll be asking somebody a question like, oh, why are you having trouble speaking directly to your CEO? And they're like, oh, I just don't know why I can't do it. Like, what does it feel like? They're like, oh, I feel small. I feel lost. I'm like, what else in your life has felt like that? And like, oh, it feels like talking back to my dad. Like, oh.
Wow. Yep. I got that.
And, it's that emotional depth that we can get to when we really investigate what's getting in our way.
Yes.
It is surprising to me. It's so touching to open up these stories, these wounds, honestly.
Yes.
And help people acknowledge them and move forward.
Absolutely. And when you have the clarity from that, it's priceless. And you go through life making decisions, and also ensuring that our kids, if we have kids, don't make those decisions too as well. Also, to your point before, when I was in the corporate world, most of my positions were very short, and I found that when I had a male boss, sometimes there'd be friction points, and I'd leave. And then years later, around 2003, when I started deepening into leadership, I started realizing that a lot of my behavior and how I showed up when I had a male boss was representative of my own relationship with my own dad. And it was just very, very fascinating to me, and it was really, really vital. And I was able to communicate these things to my dad before he passed away. And then in having that clarity, like I've been able to work with different individuals and leaders of sorts over the years without having that 5-year-old conversation or 10-year-old conversation or 15-year-old conversation get in the way of like really showing up and building something unique. So I love that you're able to bring that into the kind of the business world, helping people like uncover that, because it is about asking questions, getting clear, and seeing the cost of how this goes further, like a cost of behaving this way goes further, either in our current workspace or perhaps to people around us. For me, the biggest thing is my kids, really ensuring that
Hmm.
they don't have this in the way. They're often, as they are, as young as they are, they're often modeling my wife, myself for everything we do. So it's like not like ensuring that that doesn't get in the way for their lives as well.
Yeah, yeah. This stuff is it's I love thank you for sharing that about your own dad and your relationship, because I think that happens to so many of us. We're limited in what we can handle and what we can do by those previous experiences until we acknowledge them, until we deal with them, until we handle them directly, have the conversation with the person that it needs to be had with, not with the proxy of, in your case, of the male boss.
Yes.
And with that freedom, we can get more done. We have more room to operate. And so each time we can release one of these limiting beliefs, release these constraints, we move with more freedom in the world. And yeah, the kid stuff is very much on my mind. My kids are 5 and 3, and I can see the ways in which I sometimes am replicating the behaviors of my parents. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be that way with my kids. And yet it's just so easy to fall back on that unless I'm really hyper attuned and hyper aware. I'm like, nope, that's not the way I want to engage here. That's not how the dad I want to be.
Eric, if you could go back in time and talk to the 18-year-old version of yourself, or even give advice to someone who's 18 now, right? What would you offer that person as a gift, as they or yourself goes forward in time to live a pretty awesome, fulfilling life? What would you recommend? What would you say to that one person? What's the one piece of advice you would share?
Yeah. I think the piece of advice I would share is that life is not a sprint. It's not a race. There's not one path that you have to be fast on. When I was in my 20s, I was so concerned about falling behind. Oh, my classmates from college are doing this and I'm only here, and like I'm falling further and further behind. And I was just taking a different path. Our lives are long. Our careers are long. The first 2 years of your career do not set the course for your entire life. And the way to find your way to a successful life, a meaningful life, a purposeful life is to find what works for you. And the way you do that is experimenting. So I accidentally did that because I had 5 jobs in my first decade of working.
Mm.
2 years here, 2 years here, 2 years here, and very different environments, very different situations. And I got much clearer about like, oh, this is what works for me and what doesn't. And once I had that knowledge, that self-knowledge, I was able to apply it and guide my way into a job that was a really good fit, which was being the chief of staff for the search ads team at Google. And now as an executive coach, I now have these meaningful jobs where I can have a lot of success because I found out what works for me. And so, yeah, I would say the first decade of your career, worry less about how fast am I going and more about what direction do I want to go.
That's awesome. To totally align with that. Like, what direction do I want to go? Awesome. And next question I have for you, and one of the last questions we'll ask you as well, is what rituals, routines do you embrace each day to keep yourself aligned each day? Start your day, end your day, anything stand out? Maybe even rituals, routines, habits you invite clients to take on. You mentioned one before, as far as brushing your teeth and pausing and
Mhm.
asking a question, but just something specific that you take on each day. I'm curious about that.
I'm not much of a ritual person. Like I know that I'm not the Tim Ferriss. Here's my 3-hour morning routine that I
Mhm.
follow to make sure I have the most productive day possible. That's
Right.
not. I mean, partially
Mhm.
because I have young kids. It's like there's
Yes.
just chaos, and like I can't
Exactly.
commit to always being in the being able to handle habits in a specific form. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, I do have these kind of weekly, like, here's what I want to get done this week. That weekly reflection that I mentioned before,
Mhm.
and on a daily basis, I think it's more about noticing when I'm going off what I say I want to do. I plan to do this, I didn't do it. I want to always approach my kids with love, and yet I'm screaming at them.
Mhm.
And I, you know, instead of, I mean, it still happens. I'm not perfect.
Mhm.
And
Me
then, but
too.
I take the time to reflect, like, what happened there? Why did I get so angry? What's going on in me that their behavior instigated in me? And so it's, I guess, less proactive and more reactive. Like I look for the times when I'm not acting in alignment with my rules for engagement, my purpose, my values, my principles. And I say, let's deconstruct that. Let's postmortem. Let's find out what happened so I can do better next time. So I guess that'd be my answer.
I love it. And I think it's important to work with a coach to get in dialogue, to have conversations. Sometimes we do this on our own. It goes nowhere. It's a lot of deja vu. We've experienced that in the community. Yep.
Yeah, I have both a therapist and a coach, so that I use
Awesome.
that I deconstruct this stuff with. So that's definitely important to have somebody else to give you that outside view of like, do you see this is what you're doing? Isn't that what you've done, so many times in the past 4 years? Like, yes.
Exactly. Yeah, that which is measured improves, and having someone as a sounding board really does make a huge difference with all of that. So certainly for all of us in the audience, check out Eric's work and how to connect with him. I know you have a book called "You Have the Choice." It's accessible on Amazon. How do people reach out to you online? What's the best way of reaching out to you?
Yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn. And my coaching site, toomanytrees.com, is where to go to get more stuff. From there, I have a newsletter that comes out every couple of weeks where I share what I'm thinking and reading and writing about leadership and personal development. So sign up for that and check it out.
Amazing. Well, I love the work you do. I especially appreciate where you come from. We very similar situation in terms of where we've been technology-wise to where we are as far as creating impact. And I really wish you a lot of success as you go forward to magnify that level of impact in the world, which I know you will. And this has been a really fun conversation to have. For our audience out there, check out rulesforsuccess.com. Access this interview with highlights of it. In addition to a mind map summary, that's the engineer in me kind of created mind maps. My team is trained to do mind maps now as well, also kind of holistically kind of put it all together and much more. And also Eric's contact as well, also rulesforsuccess.com. Appreciate the conversation, Eric. Looking forward to our next one as well. Cheers.
Thanks so much, Joseph. Really appreciate it.